Well, you've probably heard it many times before, and some of you might be beyond sick of it, but this video is going to look at those infamous numbers and answer the question, does 6-7 connect to the Bible? At first glance, you have to take the numbers literally and look to see if there is any significance or connection to the 6th and 7th books of the Bible, both being in the Old Testament, which would bring us to the books of Joshua and Judges. Both books describe leaders that were important to church history, but there isn't a strong, obvious connection between the two which would bring the numbers together. Which asks, is there any place in the Bible that there is a connection? And for this, we need to go back to the beginning, to the very first book of the Bible, Genesis, where there is a pretty interesting foundation in place. The first 2 chapters of Genesis focus on God's creation stories, and this is where the meaning of the numbers become quite interesting. God began to create the world in a series of stages. You've probably heard the term days instead of stages, but I'll explain why that's not completely accurate in just a moment. For the purpose of this lesson, I'm going to refer to a book on creation that is called Bible Basics for Catholics by John Bergsma. This author provides a very interesting take on the design of creation. God begins his series of steps by creating light, separating it from darkness, then separating the sky from the sea, and then separating the land from the sea, and then providing seeds of many kinds to allow for the growth of vegetation. So he uses the separation of light and darkness in day 1 to create guiding lights for them in day 4. Now take a look at this very important detail. What do we have for the first time in a day? The sun. So, in scientific purposes, with rotation and revolution, we did not have the time system we do now. So thus, they truly are stages of creation and not days of creation. But continuing on day 5, he adds creatures to the sea and sky. And finally, on day 6, he creates land animals and then man to take care of the animals in earth. Now, the structure of the creation is very important and also provides deeper meaning. Bergsma says we should look at the stages of creation like we would bricks in a building, making 2 columns, one upon the other. Once we have the columns complete, we can take a moment to really analyze it. When God goes across, he is using one thing to set up the next. Notice how he takes what he made on the left and then adds to it on the right. He continues that pattern throughout creation, and he is also doing it with you in your life. He is setting up the next stage by allowing you to experience and learn certain things and to meet certain people, which is allowing for the next stage to be built. And now, if you know the story, God is not quite finished yet, and he has one more stage left to complete. Yes, keeping track of the numbers, we are currently at 6. And we know from the Bible in many places what the number 6 represents. If we just stopped here in our creation story, it would be incomplete. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 6, God regrets making man due to his pattern of falling into sin, and the evil one, also known as the devil in the book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible, is referred to as 666. Now, the author, John Bergsma, says God does something very special to his foundation on day 7. He provides the ultimate way to complete the building by providing the ceiling or rooftop, providing a closure, warmth, and finality to the process. Now, through day 7, God is providing for what is known as the Sabbath day, that being a day of rest and worship, one where we should give great thanks and praise for everything he has done for us. Which brings us to the meaning of the number 7. 7 in the Bible is referred to as completion, fullness, rest, and perfection. You saw how God just completed the creation story on day 7, but there are other aspects in the Bible referring to this completeness. We have many references to God's perfect 7, including 7 feasts of the Bible, and the Catholic Church has several examples of the fullness of 7, including the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit and the 7 sacraments, the ways we can obtain great amounts of God's grace in our lives. Which brings us back to the first 7, and our author and many others over time have made this interesting connection. Look at day 7 and for what it was intended. It is created for rest and worship. Now let's think about for whom God created the day, to rest and worship. Which creations can enter into these aspects? All animals, of course, can and need rest. But animals are not emotionally or spiritually developed to be able to worship God. Thus, we can see how day 7 was ultimately created for man. And so now this brings us to the second creation story, which is found in the second chapter of Genesis. Genesis 2 focuses on how God makes man and woman in his image, which is a whole series of amazing revelations and lessons in itself. But for purposes of the video, we are going to focus on what happens next. God gives Adam and Eve an order. God settles Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden to cultivate and care for it. What God is doing here is giving Adam and Eve the order of stewardship, for them to take care of the world and its creation. And as descendants of Adam and Eve, you and I are called to do the same, to be stewards of God's creation. For every responsibility you can think that God gave to Adam and Eve, he has also given to us. So now, you may be asking, why is this all being covered in a video on 6-7? It's of when it was being ordered and what happened next. Remember that God created man on day 6, so we can also figure that this order and responsibility was given then as well. Thus, God gives one more order and responsibility, and this is meant to complete the process. Yes, God gives the 7th day the Sabbath for man and woman to enter into the completion process with God. Think about it. Without the 7th day, Adam and Eve would have been able to exist, but they would not have been complete because they didn't have the fullness or completion from God. This happens on day 7. That on day 6, man and woman were created for stewardship to take care of the world and creation. And it isn't until day 7 that Adam and Eve become complete. This happens on the Sabbath day. On the Sabbath day, we become complete through rest and worship. And because of our completion, we should show appreciation or thanks to God for the many blessings he has given us through our creation. In the Catholic Church, we have something built in that takes care of all three. It's the Mass. In the Catholic Mass, we celebrate with the Eucharist, Jesus' actual body and blood. In the Greek language, the word Eucharist means thanksgiving. So thus, in every Catholic Mass, we have the opportunity to praise, worship, and enter communion with God, to whom we should be showing our appreciation or thanks for everything great in our lives. So, hopefully now things make a little more sense on how 6 and 7 are related. You were created on day 6 to enter into day 7. You were created for stewardship, to enter into praise, worship, and appreciation. If you stop at day 6 and do not enter into day 7 through praise, worship, and appreciation, in other words, do not go to church, you will be incomplete. Thus, you were not created to be only 6. You were not created to be only 7. You were created to be 6-7.